给你们看看我们的生意的。
Let me show you our business. It's 7 p.m. on Christmas Eve, and there's not a single customer here. Isn't this supposed to be an era of reduced spending? This is no spending at all. In my 20 years in the restaurant business, this is the strangest Tuesday I've ever seen. If things keep going like this, I might have to pack up early and head home for the new year. Friends, if you're struggling, just look at my situation. You'll feel much better.
其实很多人已经挺不到过年了。
Many people can't even hold on until the new year. There's just too little cash flow in the market. It's already mid-December, and I think our industry will close down by the end of the month. I expect to head back to my hometown by January. The economy is in such poor shape. There's nothing we can do.
As 2024 draws to a close, China's economy has not improved as the Chinese government once predicted. On the contrary, both the resource-based economies of North and the open markets of the South offer no hope.
中国北方的经济没有希望了。
There's no hope for northern China's economy. That was the first thing a friend from the north told me when he came to Hangzhou. Honestly, I was shocked at first. But during my recent business trip to the north, where we opened a branch office, I heard the northern branch manager say he needed connections just to open a company bank account. I truly feel that the northern economy is lifeless, plagued by bureaucracy. Entrepreneurs lack efficiency, focusing only on resource-based deals. There's no market-driven economy. Everything relies on connections. Without them, you can't even leave your house, and you get nothing done. In contrast, Guangzhou, the economic powerhouse of the South, now has a starkly quiet business district, underscoring the reality behind the phrase, China's economy is collapsing.
大家看看现在的经济环境到底有多差。
This used to be the busiest food street in Jinshaozhou, Guangzhou. Now many shops are closed, and those still open are nearly deserted. Even the KTVs up ahead have all shut down. We can't even find a place to sing karaoke anymore. I don't understand. Why can't over 1 billion people sustain our economy? Physical businesses are closing, e-commerce isn't doing well, and hundreds of thousands of wealthy people are leaving China for overseas every year. All signs seem to point to the collapse of China's economy. This year, the CCP has printed at least 20 trillion yuan, primarily to support local governments and state-owned enterprises, with little benefit to consumer spending. In January 2023, China's broad money supply was at 274 trillion yuan. By January 2024, this has risen to 298 trillion yuan, and now stands at 311 trillion yuan. Therefore, nearly 20 trillion yuan has been printed over the past 12 months. According to the latest data from the People's Bank of China, deposits increased by 19.4 trillion yuan in the first 11 months of 2024, roughly matching the amount of newly printed money. This trend reflects people and businesses rushing to deposit their money to preserve wealth and mitigate risks. Despite the large-scale printing of money, consumption has not been stimulated. This has been the case for years. Between 2021 and 2023, approximately 54 trillion yuan was printed, yet it did not bring positive economic or livelihood impacts. Most of the funds never reached consumers, so where did all this money go? In November, the Ministry of Finance announced a 10 trillion yuan debt restructuring plan aimed at saving local governments and stimulating demand. However, this plan merely converted high-interest and opaque local debts into low-interest, transparent government bonds. It did not inject new funds into the economy or stimulate consumer demand. Despite numerous economic stimulus policies in recent years, the central government has failed to revive China's economy. This proves that instead of boosting household incomes to drive consumption, the government continues to support local governments and state-owned enterprises, an approach that has failed. Even insiders within the government have criticized this strategy. In 2024, the Chinese Communist government's survival relies heavily on borrowing. The biggest issue is excessive debt. The government has essentially borrowed and spent China's next 200 years with at least 200 trillion yuan in debt. In reality, China is already bankrupt. The country is now entering a prolonged debt repayment cycle, during which the CCP shifts this debt burden onto the public by seizing wealth from businesses and individuals. As 2024 ends, much like the end of 2023, many still hope that 2025 will bring economic recovery to save them from the brink of collapse.
有谁知道明年经济会不会好？
Does anyone know if the economy will improve next year? This year has been incredibly hard. I just want it to be over with as soon as possible. The Chinese New Year is approaching and I have no money. It's only 2 months away, but I've decided not to visit my parents' home. How can I go without money? I can't even afford my son's kindergarten tuition for the next semester. If my husband can't find a job soon, I might have to sell my gold bracelet, part of my wedding dowry. It's really come to this. I just want this year to end, and I hope next year will be better. If things continue like this, I might as well starve.
Under Looking Forward to 2025 videos, many viewers comment that the economy will likely deteriorate further next year, with 2025 potentially marking the peak of the economic performance in the foreseeable future. At the end of each year, observers speculate on potential black swan events, unpredictable, low-probability incidents with significant impacts, and gray rhinos, probable risks often ignored until they cause major issues. American economist David Huang, in an interview with Western media, has boldly predicted that China's economy in 2025 will face even more dangerous challenges, with severe black swan and gray rhino events across at least 6 areas. The first area involves worsening localized crises in the real estate market. Despite efforts by the Beijing government to stabilize the sector, cities outside the Pearl River Delta, Yangtze River Delta, and Bohai Economic Rim regions may experience sharp declines. High taxes, insufficient welfare, and poor management could lead to abrupt market collapses, posing serious risks to the broader economy, local governments, and household finances. In 2024, the real estate market remained a major headache for the Chinese government, facing a dilemma. If the housing bubble bursts, economic growth may slow or even trigger a global financial crisis. However, stabilizing housing prices could further suppress birth rates, exacerbating the population crisis. Like many of China's socioeconomic issues, the housing crisis traces back to the one-child policy implemented in 1980. The government justified this policy by stating that China supported 22% of the global population with only 7% of the world's arable land. This led to strict population control measures and heavy restrictions on urban land development. Today, China's urbanization rate is close to 70%, with over 40% of the population living in cities. However, urban areas occupy just 0.66% of the national land area and 5% of arable land, far less than the amount of abandoned farmland. China's 1994 tax-sharing reform further worsened the issue by reducing the share of fiscal revenue controlled by local governments from 78% in 1993 to 44.3% in 1994. With no change in responsibilities, local governments turned to land sales as a primary source of revenue. Meanwhile, the one-child policy reduced household demand for property while boosting savings rates. With few alternative investment channels, large amounts of capital flooded the real estate market. In essence, the red line on arable land created land scarcity, turning urban development land into a ticking time bomb. The tax-sharing reform lit the fuse, and high savings rates poured fuel on the fire. Economist Yifu Xian argues that China's goal of stabilizing housing prices to preserve economic stability will be difficult to achieve. The population of homebuyers aged 28 to 37 has been shrinking since 2020, with a sharp decline expected from 2024 onward. By 2050, this population will be half of what it is in 2024. Additionally, housing prices and urban density remain excessively high. Keeping them at current levels will perpetuate low birth rates and accelerate population decline. To avoid demographic collapse, the Chinese government would need to gradually demolish existing urban structures, build new cities, and reduce urban population density to below 4,000 people per square kilometer. Housing prices would need to be drastically lowered, creating cities that are not only livable and business-friendly, but also conducive to family life. Achieving this without damaging the economy or triggering a financial crisis would require exceptional governance, something the Chinese government appears to lack. So, both the housing crisis and population collapse seem inevitable. The second dimension of black swan and gray rhino risks involved escalating debt crises within local governments and state-owned enterprises. Huang explained that mainland China's local governments manage vast fiscal resources, but many state-owned enterprises and financing platforms are burdened with significant debt. The complexity of hidden debts, including shadow banking, poses serious threats. Without effective intervention, these debts could disrupt cash flows, destabilizing local financial markets and potentially affecting the entire nation. The third area concerns major shifts in international trade relations. Huang pointed out that China's economy does not rely on the three growth drivers often cited. In reality, it heavily depends on exports. Any escalation in geopolitical risks, such as sanctions from the US and EU over China's alliances with North Korea and Russia, could severely damage China's economic and diplomatic relations. Events like previous diplomatic incidents, such as the killing of a Japanese student, could also trigger severe economic blows. With Trump returning to office, his hawkish stance on China could pose significant risks for Beijing. Trump's assertiveness and willingness to take action could create further instability. Amid worsening international relations, the yuan will likely face devaluation pressure. A deteriorating external environment, declining domestic confidence, and waning of foreign investment could all lead to yuan depreciation. Huang stated that while the depreciation of the yuan may seem beneficial for exports, it could lead to further capital flight. This would negatively impact the capital markets and the overall Chinese economy, undermining economic stability. Additionally, China's ongoing efforts to internationalize the yuan could backfire if large amounts of yuan held overseas are dumped, forcing China to use its dwindling US dollar reserves to support Belt and Road Initiative countries. This would further deplete China's foreign exchange reserves, creating another negative factor for the nation. The fifth area of risk is a decoupling of critical technology industries. Huang warned that industrialized Western nations, such as those in Europe and the United States, will likely impose stricter technology blockades on China in key areas like semiconductors, renewable energy, and AI. This could disrupt China's supply chains and weaken its technological growth potential. The issue is exacerbated by ongoing frustrations among many nations regarding China's intellectual property theft and counterfeit products. As a result, sanctions on China could become even more severe. The sixth area concerns major public health incidents, natural disasters, or industrial crises. Regarding industrial crises, Huang cited the example of China's large-scale production of EVs. Overproduction and export setbacks in Western markets could lead to a wave of unfinished projects, reminiscent of the earlier collapse of the bike-sharing industry. This would create chaos across the supply chain, wasting significant resources on EVs, solar panels, and wind energy, China's three core sectors of new productive forces. Overcapacity or sanctions could disrupt these sectors, causing market instability. In terms of public health, Huang highlighted the possibility of another large-scale pandemic outbreak in China. The lingering side effects of vaccines used during the previous pandemic also pose potential risks to public health. Any significant health crisis could have a substantial economic impact. On December 25th, Min-Shin Pei, a Bloomberg columnist and China expert, wrote that Xi Jinping may face 5 major challenges in 2025 that could shape China's trajectory for the rest of the decade. Pei noted that Xi often uses the term storms to describe the dangers China faces in the coming years. Fortunately, Xi has yet to encounter such extreme circumstances. However, with Trump poised to return to the White House, Pei argues that the first storm Xi will face is the escalation of the US-China tensions. Trump has already pledged to raise tariffs on Chinese imports to 60%. The US is also expected to tighten export controls on advanced technologies, further hindering China's progress in semiconductors, AI, and quantum computing. As China grapples with high debt, deflation, and a property crisis, its economic state is more precarious than in 2018 when Trump first imposed tariffs. This time, the greater danger lies in the possibility of U.S. national security officials adopting more aggressive tactics in Taiwan and the South China Sea, raising the specter of a superpower confrontation reminiscent of the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis. Xi's primary and most difficult task will be to prevent U.S.-China conflicts from spiraling out of control. The second challenge, Pei wrote, is whether Xi can revitalize the economy. Although Beijing recently announced plans to prioritize consumption-driven growth, these initiatives have done little to inspire confidence. The third challenge is how Xi will navigate geopolitical flexibility. In recent years, China's coercion of neighboring countries has pushed them closer to the U.S. However, if Trump imposes a 10% tariff on Eastern Asian allies, and demands greater financial contributions for U.S. military deployments, his America First policy could quickly erode these alliances. To court its neighbors, China will need to moderate its maritime claims, open its markets further, and end gray zone intimidation in disputed waters of the South and East China Seas. Hesitation on Xi's part could result in missed opportunities to weaken the U.S.-led partnership network. The fourth challenge will be how Xi can play a constructive role in ending the war in Ukraine despite China's limited influence. The conflict has severely damaged China's relationship with Europe. Although Trump may urge Beijing to help broker peace, Xi faces a genuine dilemma. Forcing Russian President Vladimir Putin to accept less favorable terms could jeopardize their no-limits friendship. However, supporting Putin's uncompromising stance will almost certainly unsettle Trump and further anger European nations. It is nearly impossible to satisfy everyone, but choosing who to appease is crucial. Otherwise, Xi may face an unprecedented dilemma, an economic and political storm. During U.S. President Joe Biden's term, there is little chance that Washington will shift its diplomatic stance to divide Moscow and Beijing. However, with the new administration swearing into office in 2025, there is unpredictability of how the next 4 years could pan out. In his article, Pei concludes that Trump's potential reconciliation efforts could deal a dual blow to Beijing. The strategic partnership Xi built with Putin would suffer severe damage. Simultaneously, the U.S. could free up significant resources and energy to intensify competition with China. Whether Xi can prevent such an outcome by either encouraging Putin to stand firm or negotiating a major deal with Trump himself remains an open question. The only certainty is that after more than a decade in power, the decisions Xi makes next year are likely to be the most critical in his tenure.